What is up, you guys? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Nuphy Halo 65, and we're going to be doing a couple of mods here so that we can change the way it sounds, especially the spacebar. That's one thing that I didn't like how it sounded, so we're going to be attempting a couple of things. I have some O-rings here to try it out. I also have some foam. Now you can go ahead and buy this at any craft stores. I bought it at Michael's. This is a 1mm foam, and then this is a 2mm foam. Personally, I'm going to be using the 1mm, but you can go ahead and decide what kind you want. I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple of them in here, and I'm gonna do a little quick sound test of the spacebar specifically, with different ways that you can go ahead and mute it a little bit more, especially because with the Gateron Kangaroo switches, it does get pretty rattly. All right, so I also have another mod that I'm gonna do. It's a tape mod. So I do have some painter's tape here. We're gonna go ahead and pick up the PCB and the plate. This will go on the bottom of the PCB, so we can go ahead and get a little bit more of that poppy sound. This is not gasket mounted, this is plate mounted, so you can't really do much about it. I'll show you guys in a second here. I did try and gasket mount it, but unfortunately you can't even without all the screws. So I do still have the screws off, and I do have some gaskets in there, but unfortunately there's zero flex to the board still, so that's definitely not going to work. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is go ahead and do the tape mod. So we need to take apart the keyboard. Now, if you're following along, as you guys can see here, I already have the switches and the keycaps off. So if you need time to do that, go ahead and take some time now, pause the video, go ahead and remove all of the keycaps and the switches from the keyboard itself. All right, so now that you've taken off all of the keycaps and switches, next thing you want to do is remove the screws that are holding the whole plate in place. So there's 11 screws. They're all going to be white. I already took them all off. They're all the same size, so you don't really have to remember how they went, as long as you remember that the white ones are the ones that go on the top or on the outside on top of the plate. All right, so now that you have all of the screws out, next thing we need to do is separate the top plate from the bottom plate. And I've already opened this before, so I know exactly what's going on. They kind of use a little bit of plastic, and it has a little bit of latches. So when it goes in, it just kind of attaches. So when you pull it out, you are going to have to use a little bit of force to pop those out. Don't pull too hard, because there is a battery inside of this, and the daughter board, which is connected back here, that controls the switch between wired Bluetooth and the 2.0 gigahertz. You might rip that out. So make sure that when you're pulling it out, you're just going carefully along the edges. Now, if you guys can see here, mine's actually coming apart. Even the plate in the PCB, everything's getting switched apart or sandwiched out. That's because I already took off the screws. Again, I've already taken this apart. Here are the screws that are actually supposed to be holding the plate and the PCB to the top frame, to the aluminum frame. So yours should not be coming apart in 3 pieces. Yours will only be the top piece that will have the plate attached and the bottom piece. So now again, you can take off the top plate easily. There's that piece. And then when you get to this part, this will be attached to this part. So whenever you can't take off the top plate, I guess. So whenever you remove it, you're gonna have to carefully lift it up towards the top of the keyboard. And you guys will see here, there's that battery connector there. I'm gonna go ahead and take a video here. Actually, I'm recording here with my iPhone. So there is that battery connector there that we're gonna have to detach. So you just have to use either a screw, a flathead, or just your thumbnail. You can go ahead and just start pushing out, and it's like a little Lego. You can just go ahead and snap it right out. There's the connector there, and now you have your plate and your PCB. And like I mentioned, I did try and gasket mount this. So if you guys can see there, I did put some gaskets on the plate itself, or the PCB, but unfortunately that didn't really do much, because this top frame, when you place it in here, if it's so snug that it honestly doesn't really allow for much wiggle room, it just kind of gets locked in place. All right, so now that we have this, I'm actually gonna remove these gaskets because they serve no purpose and they actually just get in the way. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. So you don't have to do much to this. Oh, I guess. All right, so I guess if you haven't taken it apart like I have, this piece will come attached here. Here, let me show you how it comes. There you go. This will be one whole piece and it'll come in like this. So there will be 4, or I guess there's 6 of these little black screws. You can go ahead and see, you'll see them here. There's like some on the corners, 2 in the middle, and then 2 on the other edges or the corners. So you just take all those 6 out and then you'll be able to pop the PCB and plate right out and separate it from the frame. Now if we look at the frame even more, or separate it even more, you can see that Nuphy says that the top frame is actually aluminum, where the bottom plate is PCB, not PCB, it's just plastic, ABS plastic. But if we separate it from the top, you see that it's a very light kind of piece of aluminum. It's not really a thick, and the whole top piece itself actually isn't even made of aluminum. There's this plastic piece that goes inside that holds the rest of the keyboard together, and then you have a thin piece of aluminum. So if you see the 2 pieces, this is the piece that's on the inside, and then you have this piece of aluminum here. So if you hear that, that's a piece of aluminum. This reminds me kind of how Keychron does their K series, the K2, the non-pro versions of their K series, where they just have, whenever they have an aluminum piece, they just have a little bit of attachments that gives it more of a premium look. But there really isn't a full one piece aluminum. This one's actually pretty thin, which could make a lot more noise. So having this piece of plastic inside actually helps out a lot. Dull that noise. Here's a sound comparison here. Here's that. That's with no piece of plastic inside. And now that's the sound with the piece of plastic inside. So as you guys can tell, this does help null it out a little bit. It doesn't really sound as pingy. So that is helpful. And that's the pieces that are attached to the bottom of the keyboard. So for the plate and the PCB, you could separate them. You could do other mods if you want to change out the inside, but honestly, they've already done a pretty good job. They have a piece of silicone that's white. That's that layer between the PCB and the plate. If you guys can see it there, I'm not sure if you guys can see that. And then on the bottom, you actually see that the switches have this gray color, even though the PCB is black. That's because they have another film or another layer of foam that kind of acts kind of like switch pads. If you guys ever see those on Amazon, you can buy individual ones that you attach over every switch. They just have a whole piece inside here that works for every single switch at once. So that in there, I'm just gonna leave it alone, not really do much. The only thing I'm gonna do is add some tape to the back. Again, tape mod, we're just gonna take some tape, and I'm only gonna do one layer. We're gonna see how that works, and then later on, if I want to add more, I can. I already know how to take it apart. Once you've taken it apart once, taking it apart another couple of times isn't gonna be that difficult. Now when you do put some of the tape on the bottom, you do have to remember that you still need to have holes for the switches, along with also leaving a hole for that daughter board connector. So what I do is I just rip a piece out. So I just literally just grab it and I rip towards where the connector is. So if you guys can see there, the connector is now available. It's easy to use, it's open, and we can go ahead and still connect the daughter board. All right, so straight from the start, just looking at this, I think I'm gonna add another layer. That way there's 2 and everything is covered. So yeah, you can go ahead and add another one. You can leave it at 1 and see how it sounds and then add more. But just looking at it now, I'm gonna add 1 more layer. All right, so now that you guys have the tape on there and it's fully taped up, so you guys can see I did the whole bottom, made sure the whole bottom was covered except the battery connector there or the daughter board connector there. So now that that's taped up, I'm going to go ahead and make the holes for the switch. There's a leg in the middle of the switch. It's like the stabilizing leg that goes straight into the PCB. I'm gonna make that middle hole in there, and then I'm gonna see if these tiny little side legs can go through the tape themselves or if they even need to really go through the whole piece. I'm just using this screwdriver here. You guys can use whatever you use to take it apart, and I'm literally just going around and just poking a hole through all of the switches through that little middle connector or the middle leg stabilizing place. All right, so now that I have that piece, I am going to reattach the daughter board. Now, really quick on the bottom place, or I guess the bottom piece, there is this silicone piece for sound dampening. This actually works really well. It's silicone, kind of like how people do a pour over silicone, and I've seen people do that with the Keychron K2. They've already included that. It's honestly really nice. It works really well for sound dampening. And there is the battery. The battery is attached to the silicone piece. So if you do take out the silicone, the battery will come with it. So yeah, it works well. I'm honestly not gonna do anything to it. I'm not gonna switch it out. I like the way it works. I like the way it sounds. So I'm gonna leave that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take this and attach it to the daughter board. Okay, so I actually lied. We don't want to attach it yet, so detach the daughter board if you've already attached it. We're not gonna do that first. So before we attach it to the bottom, we actually have to attach this piece to the top piece here. And again, like I said, it's those little black screws, so you just have to align it, make sure the space bar and the little stabilizer place here, this little ridge or this little gap goes straight to the plastic there. Once it's in there, make sure you attach the black screws. Okay, so now that you have the top piece attached to the plate, this is how it originally would have looked. It's all one piece. We can go ahead and attach it back to the daughter board. All right, so as I'm trying to put it back, I just realized that these mounts here, there's some places here, some mounting holes that will attach this, the top piece, to the bottom piece. I did not make holes for them here where the tape goes. So we're gonna have to do that first. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this screwdriver and I'm going to poke holes wherever those mounts are. Or what you can actually do is come out on the other side. Actually, that's not large enough. Just take your screwdriver and just kind of eyeball it where it goes. Make sure that you're not clicking too hard. You should be able to make a hole rather easily wherever those are. All right, so now that you've had those mounting holes made, now you should be able to connect the daughter board, and then you can go ahead and screw in the top. All right, so now that you go ahead and connect the daughter board, you can go ahead and take this and then just line it up and start pushing it into place. All right, now that you have your main keyboard set back up, we're gonna go ahead and reattach all of the tiny screws. All right, so now that I have all the screws back in place, the next thing I want to do is do all of the switches. Now I took out all of the Gateron kangaroos, baby kangaroos that came with it. Now for this one, I'm actually going to use some of my extra switches. I'm going to make all of the alphas the Gateron Black switches. They're the Gateron Pro, so they do come pre-lubed. And then the rest, I'm actually going to be using the Texas Sapphire V2s that are really tactile and really bumpy. So I'm going to be using that on everything else. So now the next piece that we want to do is attach all of the switches to the keyboard itself. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so there you go. I went ahead and I attached all of the switches to the keyboard. Like I said, I used Gateron Blacks for the alphas, and then I used the Texas Sapphire V2s for everything else. So now the next piece is now you need to attach all of the keycaps to the keyboard itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these and place them on here. And now for the spacebar, we're gonna go ahead and place it in there. If you guys can see this, let me see, can you see it on here? So when you push on either side, this will actually move to either side, which means that the stabilizers are not as tall as the switch. So whenever you click it, that's why you hear a little bit more of a rattle. So I'm gonna try and fix that, because I use the black, which is usually pretty light, but here's what it sounds like with the Gateron Black, no extra mods. And now we're gonna go ahead and put silicone, and underneath, not the silicone, the foam, we're gonna include that to the bottom of the case or the space bar. Now, like I said, I just bought this 1mm foam from Michaels, and then I went ahead and just did it myself. I went ahead and used the scissors. I cut out a piece that could fit in here, and I went ahead and cut it out. And now we're gonna put the space bar back. And now this is what it sounds like. And I actually forgot one piece. I forgot to place back the ones that came with the keyboard itself. These Nuphy silicone tips that go in the middle. All right, so now here's what it sounds like with both of the things together. Now again, because of that misalignment, let me see if you can see it here. You see how that comes out? That's what happens when you click on one side too much. It pops it right out of the other side. So that's something we want to avoid, because obviously that's going to be really bad experience, and it's going to rattle even more. So because of that, the foam helps, but what helps even more that I realized was having those small silicone rings, or the O-rings. Now again, I bought these from Glorious. I bought these off of Amazon. Cost me like $6-7, I can't remember. But if I just place an O-ring on each of the stabilizers, or each of the stems here that go to the stabilizers, that is going to help stabilize those pieces, because it adds that extra millimeter between the stem and the spacebar itself. So now when you hit it, this is actually upside down right now. So now when you go to one side, it should not be pulling up unless you're clicking right on the edge. But with the O-rings, this is what it sounds like. Still a little rattly, which is why I am going to be using both the O-rings along with the silicone piece. With both of those, this is what it sounds like. So it does help it out a little bit, especially when you're typing. So that is the way I'm going to be modding the spacebar, so it's not too loud, especially since it's one of the most typed on pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. And again, that's not really much you can do. I mean, it has a lot of silicone already inside, a lot of sound dampening. So that's all I'm going to do, just a tape mod, switch out or change out the switches. to the Gateron Blacks and then the Sapphire Texy V2s, whatever they're called. So I switched it out to that, and then I added that to the Spacebar to make it a little more quiet. All right, and the last thing that you can do if you don't like having a big piece of foam inside of there is using these 2mm pieces. Now again, bought it from Michaels. They're really small. They're actually the size of these pieces in here, because we're actually going to be basically placing it on top like this, basically under the Spacebar. So if we place both of the pieces in there and then put the Spacebar back with the silicone pieces inside, just put that on top. This is what it's going to sound like. So it does get a little more quiet with those pieces in there. I actually think that's how I'm gonna leave it. The travel does become a lot more shallow, or a lot less. So if you don't like having a key that doesn't really move, the 2mm might be a little too much, but you can always go with the 1mm plus the O-rings. That'll work just as well. So that's all the mods I'm going to do to my keyboard. There's not really much that you can or should be doing. The keyboard, like I said, comes with a lot of silicone already inside for sound dampening. The only thing that was bothering me a lot was the Spacebar itself, so I got that fixed. Let me know that in the comments. What do you think of these mods? Is it something that you're going to be doing to your own Halo 65? Let me know down there. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed the content and if you got something out of it. Make sure you subscribe to not miss any of my future uploads, and I will catch you on the next one.